So we just finished our conversation with David here. It's been, we'll touch upon a lot of topics, AI, because obviously you can't not talk about AI these days, agents. We also talked about like KPIs, like how do you measure your success in an organization? And if you can't, how do you make sure that you're valuable? We talked about negotiations, procurement, Salesforce. We talked about how to make sure that you're ready to take the steps forward in your digital transformation and even like step into the AI world. Lots of fun anecdotes and also tips if you're like aspiring AE that wants to learn from David, who has been smashing his targets consistently throughout his years. So tune in everywhere you find your podcasts. Cheers. Perfect. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Anders.
Looking forward to having a podcast conversation with you. You're the commercial lead in One Marketing. You have been in Oracle, Salesforce, Treasure Data. Now lately you've done taken the leap from software sales to more of the consulting approach. So happy to dig a little bit into that. But today you're here as a person, not
as a thing, but
not
as a person.
Yeah, exactly. Representing yourself.
I am indeed,
yeah. So what are you excited about these days?
What am I excited? Well, I'm excited about this. I mean, I've been looking forward to it. So this is great. Like everyone else, I'm excited about AI, right? I think it's something that's unavoidable. It's unavoidable if you've worked in tech, if you're interested in tech, if you work in consulting. It's just something that's omnipresent. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone wants to know something about it. Everyone wants to dig deeper into it. So obviously it's something that we also spend a lot of time on. And I try to get my bearings. Wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I'm trying to get there.
What do you think is that people haven't understood yet that you might like feeling that you're on the grasp of?
I mean, one of the things that I've talked to a lot of our customers about, and again, I'm speaking on my behalf, but I'll use myself as an example. So a lot of the things is our customers are asking us about like AI, what should we do with it? Like, what's the point? Everyone's talking about it. My CEO went to some, event. They could do stuff. Can we do the same, right? I think one of the things that we are sort of talking to them about is that it seems like everyone wants to do a AI transformation of their business, but they've sort of forgotten the middle part, which is sort of the digital transformation. So we used to talk a lot about digital transformations for the last, 10 years. And now everyone sort of wants to leapfrog that and jump right into AI. So I think that's a conversation we're having, is like AI is brilliant. It can do a lot of stuff, but just maybe take a step back, understand what is it that you're trying to achieve. Do you have the data in place? Do you have the processes in place? Do you have the people in place? Have you built the business case for it? A lot of the customers we talk to haven't. So it's like we want to do something, but we don't really know why. So it's like, Simon Sinek, like, start with the why. Why do you want to do it? I think a lot of companies are sort of realizing that, well, hopefully they'll realize that, you can't just do AI just to do AI.
But it feels like this is like the continuous circle. Like I remember this is now probably 15 years ago when Facebook launched, Pages or whatever. Yeah. And then, the CEO saw that that's possible and everybody went, we should have Pages. Obviously, this AI is like on a completely different scale.
Yeah.
But it's like people continuing to jump into things without necessarily knowing what it is. And then, like the Pages, if you didn't have an editorial program behind that, then it just went into nothingness. So what, my CEO is super excited about AI. I'm excited about AI. I want to do something. What should be the first step to think about then? What do you say to your clients?
Just take a step back and sort of get the basics in place first, right? What is it that you want it to do for you, right? It's very old school, right? But it's like, what's the use case? What's the business case? Like, what is it you're trying to solve for? Are you just deploying AI to do it? So I have a customer that I talked to about it, and they were like, no, we've been, trying to build our own agent, and we've been tinkering and back and forth, and we give it a lot of information, and it gives some, good answers back and some weird answers back, and it's, and then I was like, okay, but how long have you been working on it? Well, a couple of years. Okay. And what's the plan? Like, when are you launching? No, we're not going to launch it. Okay, why? Well, we don't really trust it. So basically, we just want to test it out. We want to work on it. We want to bring resources to it. And I was like, okay, but isn't that kind of expensive? Like, just to work on something and never really planning on deploying it. I think that's kind of what I'm seeing out there is everyone's sort of trying to do stuff, right? You use ChatGPT, right, or Gemini, and you do stuff and you build a picture or something, but they haven't really figured out exactly what it is that it's going to solve for. I'm hoping that we'll see more and more of those things and it getting a little bit more concrete what you can do with it. But I think right now everyone's just trying to figure out what leg to stand on.
So what type of use cases do you think is the most,
the first ones,
first one to do, like low-hanging fruit?
I think if you look at what you use ChatGPT for and I use it for, it's very much like for content creation, not necessarily in pictures and video and audio and stuff, but more like, I've written an email. Can you make this a little more professional, make it shorter, make it more engaging for outreach? So I think now it's very much like generative based on rules, right? So it's like, I want to send out an email to these people who work in insurance or banking or retail. What do they care about? Draft something for me that I can send out that they will sort of respond to. So I think it's very much getting those ideas started and getting the ball rolling and stuff. And it isn't as much AI taking over and autonomously doing stuff. So I think that's where we're headed probably and hopefully. But I think for now, most companies are probably already doing stuff with it. And I think they need to productize it a little bit more. I think that will be the first thing to look at is, giving a tool to your people, having them dabble in it, and then figuring out what they can do with it. And then they will help create the use cases for it themselves.
Yeah. I mean, that it's getting more adoption because my mother, who is 1 year from retirement, is now talking to me about Copilot. And, and she works in a municipality, and they have gotten like directives that they should use it more when they're writing emails and so forth. So it's.
I mean, my dad, he's Italian. He's lived in Denmark for plus 40 years, but if he has to send out an email and he's a little bit insecure, right? He can write Danish, but he gets insecure about spelling or stuff like that. And he'll just, feed it to the machine. It will give him something back and then he'll use it afterwards, right? It's something he could probably do with other tools, but he really likes the fact that he can send it something in Italian. It will give him something in Danish back. And then he can ask does this make sense? And if you were this, would you understand what I'm trying to say? So I think the whole conversation piece, right now it's in writing, but I think it will soon be adopted to voice as well. I think more and more people are getting used to actually talking to it. And I think it'll just be those day-to-day stuff that just makes you more productive, makes life easier.
What I'm a little bit worried about is this brain fog that I can feel that I'm getting while using, ChatGPT a lot. Yeah. And I recognize it from when doing like Euler's formula, calculating the graph area under a graph, forehand. Super easy formula, but it's like 2 A4 pages of just plus and minuses. Yeah. Only pluses actually. And then you're like, after using that on Texas T89 Plus, you just ruined your, public math skills.
Yes.
And I feel that now too as well. I'm using ChatGPT to everything to the point where my wife says, "Ask your friend," because it's continuously I'm like, and as soon as there's a little bit of friction, I was like, let's just talk this out with ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean, I think the use cases kind of build themselves over time. I think one of the things that I see right now is that you don't really trust it necessarily completely.
No.
So. It still has errors. It uses sometimes it just makes up stuff, right? But I think what we're heading for is, and I'll you and I are more or less the same age. I'm a little bit older than you, but I don't know if you remember in the old days when you had to drive somewhere, you would have a GPS, like a TomTom. You would put it in the front of your car, and you would ride where you were going. You would probably also just print out a map just in case. Right, because you knew that it would sometimes ask you to drive left while you were on a bridge, or would have you cross a field somewhere. It would just hallucinate, right? It would just give you weird suggestions. So you would always have a map with you. Then at some point you started to say, okay, cool. Now I can it doesn't ask me to drive through the ocean to get to Sweden, but it gives me the right direction. However, if you were driving with your wife And she said, no, it says go left, but I know the way home. So let's just go straight ahead. You would, do what your wife said, right? But I think what happened at some point was now, today, you would tell your wife like, yeah, but the car is saying something different and I trust the car more than I trust you, right? So I think that's a matter of the technology has sort of matured into something where now we trust it. We know that it won't bring us into trouble. So now we trust it more than humans.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're headed.
And also, depending on how bold you are, if you want to disagree with your wife.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And also, I did this. I challenged my wife.
Oh.
I trusted Google Maps.
Yeah.
The only challenge was that I was driving in the Azores.
Yeah.
And Google Maps sucks in Azores. So all of a sudden we're in like a field with cows on our way up to this mountain hiking spot.
Yeah.
And, I still hear this, to this day.
Yeah, of course. Now she has that. Yeah.
Yeah. So also trust but verify.
Exactly.
Again, we're back to that.
Yeah. And that's, for AI, that's the guardrails, right? You need to have those guardrails in place when you use AI. What data is it going to use? How much can you let it hallucinate? What does it get access to? And I think that's also where we'll see a lot of, for a consultancy business like ours, just putting up guardrails is something that I will spend a lot of time on because you don't want it to give you wrong information, right? Especially if you work with banking, insurance, healthcare, right? You want to make sure that the output it brings is something that is relevant and something that, from a compliance perspective, that is true.
But I think one of the cool things that is coming now that, everyone is spending a lot of money on, but like we both worked in Salesforce before, Agentforce is like the hottest thing since sliced bread, according to Salesforce. And but also like HubSpot is also launching their, AI tool like chat-witted CRM. And that has, insane, because today the CRM is kind of a boring database that nobody really likes to work in.
I agree. I've talked to some of my smarter colleagues about it, right? And I think the SaaS business in general is just, if you look at it, it's a database with an application on top of it, right? But it's still just a database. And I think what AI will do is it will change fundamentally how we work with application as CRM, customer service, and all of that stuff. Because, again, it's just databases. And then you have like an application on top of it with AI. AI can be voice. So at some point, you'll start communicating with your data from a voice perspective, or it will record, or you can use imagery, or you can take pictures and video and stuff. So CRM, as you and I used to work with, and where you are in my case for not forecasting and stuff like that, I think that'll be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
I think we're headed there.
And I think also right now, like agent is it's a big buzzword. And people don't necessarily want to hear agent. They want to hear, Steven, who is my marketing manager that works 24/7, writing amazing copy for $7 an hour.
Yeah.
Like that's
who's never sick, who doesn't talk back, who doesn't go on maternity leave.
So it's also maybe like how you're now gonna position which in your world, which agents do you think that will be the most what do you think which agents are
who's going to win? Who's going to win?
Who are you most excited about, like on those?
I think tools, a fool with a tool, it depends. And that's the typical, that's something I learned when I became a consultant, right? Before I used to say like Tricidata, Oracle, Salesforce. But I think now it's like, it doesn't really matter necessarily. I think, it does obviously matter that the tool that you're working with can do what you're expecting it to do. But I don't think any projects or any implementations or anything else fail because of technology. That's usually not the case. The case is always you haven't done your homework, you don't have the right processes in place, you don't have the right people in place, you haven't figured out how to measure on what you're doing. So I don't think necessarily I'm going to say, well, Salesforce are doing this, they're doing great, and Amazon is doing this, and people are building their own with ChatGPT or Google, and I see a lot of them, but I still just regard them as tools. I don't think that necessarily is going to make the big difference. I like the approach of Salesforce, obviously, because I do that because what they're trying to do versus some of the others is to make it very specific for each application. So instead of having this huge LLM where you just put in all your company data and then it can do like sales and marketing and customer service and everything and legal and HR and stuff, they build or they offer the opportunity to build an agent for the use case that you're actually trying to solve for. I think that's probably the approach that I would do myself if it was my business. So just saying like, I need something that can help me in customer service. I need to be able to be reachable 24 hours a day. I will give it the information that it needs. I will tell it not to hallucinate and not make up stuff. But I've sat with some of our customers and I've asked them, like, if I go down to your customer service and I ask them, what's the 10 question you get the most, right? They all know about it. They can all answer it. Like they don't hesitate. They know exactly what they get asked about because customer service get the same question over and over again. So if you can somehow automate and get the agent to help you with those 10 questions, obviously you will get questions that differ from those 10 questions, and that's what you should spend your time on. So everyone's worried about like, yeah, AI will make everyone unemployed and stuff. I don't think so necessarily. I think it will make everyone more productive. It will up the productivity of teams. But if you talk to someone in customer service and they're talking about those 10 questions, like if you could get a robot or a bot to take care of those 10 questions, then your people can spend much more time on the things that differs from those 10 questions. And that will make you more productive, and it will also make it so that you will offer a much better customer experience.
But I think like they will obviously people will obviously get fired because it's they have to be reskilled.
I think that's a better way of putting it, right? So I don't think necessarily you'll see like an Armageddon of people getting fired, but I think you'll see people getting reskilled, as you talk about, and moved into other positions within the business.
Yeah, I think it depends on the CEO. Like there will be CEOs that will be like,
oh yeah, definitely,
nice, bigger bonus because I'm getting more profitability here.
Yeah.
And then would be someone that says, oh, I can get even higher profits because revenue is increasing with these measurements. But that's the case today as well.
I think it's a matter of maturity, right? If you look at some of the companies who's tried that, I think Klarna, everyone's probably heard about the story about Klarna, who was like all excited about AI. We're going to fire all the customer service reps. The AI is going to handle everything for us. And then, a year in, they're like, holy shit, we made a mistake. We need to hire people back and it's more expensive. And people didn't want to come back because when's the next time you're going to,
Was that what happened? I haven't...
It was what happened, yeah. So basically, Klarna decided on, AI is great. They canceled a lot of the technology they had, Salesforce being one of them, because now AI was going to, automate everything. It's going to be easy. We're just going to tell it to do stuff. They laid off a bunch of people in sales and in customer service. And then at some point, their CEOs sort of got to the realization, like, people actually want to talk to people. There's something about like people buy from people get comfort from people get advice from people. Like the human touch is still relevant. Maybe that's because the technology isn't mature enough yet. But they started to rehire a lot of the people that they laid off. But they actually also faced that a lot of the people that they laid off didn't want to come back.
No.
Because like, I'm just going to wait for the next time you get an idea and then I'm going to get laid off again. So I think that's also part of it. It's also like if you run like a business, how much do you put into AI on the expense of your current employees? I think that's also going to be a very difficult decision. Who do we replace with what? Are we sure? And what happens if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
Do you have a plan for that?
I thought it was hilarious because obviously things could have changed in the years since I quit Salesforce until that's the caveat.
I hope so.
That's the caveat. Yeah. But Klarna was a really small Salesforce client, like extremely small.
Yeah.
So when they came out and this came and said we're canceling Salesforce, I was like chuckling a little bit because I'm like, okay, like that didn't have a lot. There was a nice logo to have, but it wasn't really making any blip on any ARR.
No, I don't think anyone was worried about it necessarily. But I think the story
was a smart move by Klarna's PR department to hijack, the Salesforce brand.
I agree.
And Workday as well. There was no, but I got cold by AI agent the other day. That was and that was really good. Like it was. I guess also since I'm interested in AI, it was a pattern interrupt that I enjoyed, but it was really smooth, and it it was super clear, and it said like, I'm qualifying you for this consultancy engagement that we would like to ask you about. Do you have 5 minutes now? I was like, yeah, sure. And like, are you an AI agent? Yes, I am. And like she introduced herself as an AI agent, and for these kind of like repetitive, tasks that, she just wanted to check me out, like which qualifications did I have for her clients. Super smooth. And then I asked like, how, what are you built on? Because I got,
so you got to interview her.
Yes, because obviously I got interested, and I was like, this is actually we have 2 layers. So it's OpenAI that is in the foundation, but we also have a voice and like some kind of outbound
dialer and everything else.
That was pretty cool.
No, but I think that will happen a lot, right? And I talked to another customer of ours, and they were saying like, but people don't want to talk to a robot, and and that's a lot in customer service. So I know we're called One Marketing, but we don't necessarily do marketing to some extent, and I'll explain that afterwards. But we were talking about customer service, and there was a little bit of a worry about like, but if people call in, don't they expect to talk to a person? But we also talked about the alternative, and right now the alternative was basically you calling in, and it was like, hey, so if you're calling about your recent product, press 1. If you're calling about, and the whole process, basically it was a very long process of pressing buttons and getting through, and please enter your your number, and it was just a very cumbersome process, right? And actually, some companies actually do it to sort of deflect calls. Like at some point you'll just get annoyed and you'll hang up. But that was the alternative, right? So if I have an issue with my product or my subscription or something like that, if my 2 alternatives is 1, talking to an agent that can answer all my questions, that's always available, that knows most of the things I'm asking about, and the other one is pressing a button, is it this about, and is this about, and please enter your PIN number and stuff, I will always choose the agent, right? So I think that's also like scenarios. Like, what's the scenario? What is it that we're solving for, and what's the alternative to actually building it?
Yeah, but this is about maturity again, right? Because I was speaking with CMO yesterday who is based in the US, and we're talking about like what's the differences between US, UK, and the Nordics. And throughout like the last 15-20 years, you can see the same trends. Like US is maybe like 5 years ahead of UK, and UK is 3 years ahead of the Nordics. So it's like when you call a bank in the US, they say like, please say your customer ID number, or please. Whereas like now that's starting to happen in the Nordics. Like it's.
I don't think you should disregard regulations and compliance and stuff, right? GDPR is a big deal, right? I think sometimes that's also when I've worked for US companies basically always, and they're always like, why don't you do this, and why don't you just that, and why don't you show this case, right? And it's always like, we can't really use any of your case work because basically it's not allowed to do what you're showcasing, right? So I think that's also what's holding a lot of companies back is regulation. Like, are we allowed to do so? What happens if?
Do you think so? Because we still have companies that is, trying to personalize by saying hi first name. So is that a regulation thing?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we I've worked with customers who are afraid to use like custom audiences on Facebook, right? Because then we're sharing customer information, and we can say, well, it's hashed, and you don't actually give them an email, you give them a hashed email, and it can't be legal. But I think, I think legal and compliance is omnipresent in all decisions regarding customer data and customer experience.
Yeah, but that is also like, if we're now going into the GDPR lovely field here, what is a personal identifiable information? I always remember my university friend Bosse, whose email address, I'm going to out him on here, is snyggorik99@hotmail.com. I'm not sure if he still uses that, but I'm not sure that snygg, which translates to like beautiful and rich, 99.
Yeah, cool.
You know, like I don't think that's identifiable in any way.
Probably not.
No.
Probably
So it's
not.
like, then it's, you know, the legal department in that bank or usually insurance and that's field that is saying like, oh, email should be PII.
I think it's also like if you can cross-reference with other databases and stuff. I think there's a valid point for being careful. Like, to be honest, I think that, you know, you're giving a lot of data to. I could give you an example. So some years back, we work with, and that was when I was sort of in the advertising business. We work with, you know, the Momondos and the Booking.com and all of those things, and the airline, right, SAS and Norwegian stuff, and they would use Google. Right, so they would upload a list of their customers, and then they would do these customer audiences, and then they actually told, like, you know, these are people who booked within the last 3 months, or this is someone who books like a Christmas vacation every year and stuff, and that was sort of what they did, and then at some point Google launched Google Flights. I'm not saying that again, you know, I'm not saying that Google used that data to launch Google Flights, but I'm just saying that if you give too much information to these companies, you really have to be careful what they use the data for, right? So I think that's where the concern comes in. So let's say that Google at some point, or Facebook, or someone else, or Meta, launch something that is competing with your bank, your insurance company, with Klarna, whatever. Like, what happens with the data that I've given, right? And one thing is what it says, but we all know that.
Yeah, and then we go and download how I look like I'm old. Face app that comes from you know, some sketchy place, and then it's then you have biometrics. Why is One Marketing not doing marketing? What you said?
Yeah. Well, you know, we are, but I think so. I was interviewed. I haven't really done podcasts before, but I've done a couple of interviews, and I did one with the Danish Marketing Association, Dansk Markedsføring, and I was talking to their CEO, and he was like, you know, what are you guys doing? And One Marketing has been around for 20 years. Like, we have our 20 years anniversary actually this month. And I told him about what it is that we do. And I was like talking about, you know, the data foundations, the APIs, and how we, you know, build CDPs before there was anything called CDPs. And we did marketing automation before it was really called, and like talking about SQL and stuff. And he was just looking at me like, you know, like I was a plant, right? He was like, and then at some point he was like, but what you guys do isn't marketing. Like, that's not marketing. Marketing is like creative stuff. It's like campaigns. It's a new logo. It's a new brand identity. It's TV. It's like, and that's not what we do. So what we do is we look at customer lifetime value. So we look at what's the potential you have with your customer database, you know, both your current customers but also future customers. Look at what's the potential that you can actually deliver on. So what do you want as a company from your customers? Like, you know, if you're an insurance company, all of my customers have 3 insurances, but they could actually have 5. So the potential is those 2 next ones. So we help them calculate that, and then we help them look at, from a technology perspective, from a data perspective, how can we actually achieve that additional goal? But then on the other hand, we also flip it around and say, okay, but if I'm a customer of your insurance company, what is it that I want from you, right? So I want to make sure that I'm covered. I want to make sure that if my house burns down, you know, if someone breaks into my car and stuff. And then we try to match those 2 things. So we help companies match the needs and wants of their own customers, and then what they actually want to achieve from them. And that's kind of what we do from a technology perspective.
But isn't that like, I feel like what you're describing is like the evolution of marketing. Is it, because what he was mentioning is like the traditional marketing, and marketing hasn't been around for that long. So it's like, but there's this, you know, if we go back 10 years, like the only ones who had CMOs were like IKEA and H&M in the Nordics, maybe Lego, you know, like, and then you go about, and if someone had it in a smaller company, it was basically just to give them a fancy title and have them a little bit shut up, you know, like over there, like you're C-level.
Exactly.
And then 5-8 years ago, 7 maybe, something like that here in the Nordics, there was more of like this how can a CMO actually talk to the CFO so he understands that it's not a cost center, that is actually revenue generating. And I think that's the shift that has happened, right? The conversation between sales and marketing, that's, you're actually giving me leads that are qualified and not just like, shut up at hotmail.com.
I've always said that the biggest issue for CMOs is actually articulating their value. I think I told you this once, but when we onboard a new customer or we have like the first couple of meetings, like I'm the commercial guy, right? I'm not the technical guy at all. But what I always do is when we talk to someone, I always like, what are you measured on? Like, they're like, what do you mean? Yeah. If you go into your manager and ask for a raise, what did you tell him or her that you did? Like, I don't know. I mean, I have X amount of FTEs. Like, oh, cool. I increased the open rates of the emails. Like, okay, does your boss care about open rates for emails? Like, no, probably not. Okay. What does your boss care about? Like, revenue, top line revenue, how much we sell online, so they have like these strategic goals. And I think marketeers in general are just really bad at finding these vanity metrics that doesn't really move anything for a CFO. Like you mentioned the CFO, right? They don't care about open rates for emails or delivery rates because we can't measure open rates anymore. So now we say, okay, well, at least we send out 1 million emails. It's like, oh, cool. Did any of them buy? I don't know. I hope so. So I think one of the things that I'm hoping that we're seeing more and more of is that marketing are getting more mature in what they're trying to achieve from a strategic business KPI perspective and not just vanity metrics. And luckily, I see that more and more, especially within regulated industries, because they can't really go out and do like, this is what I did on the back of this newspaper, or look at this TV ad, that's what we did. But it's getting more and more into the business of like, I am actually moving the needle on these KPIs. And that's actually also a big part of what we do for our customers, is finding those KPIs. What is it that you have an influence on? What can you move? And how can you report it to the people you need to report it to?
So when I'm a super startup, right? And I'm looking into marketing and, I feel like the lowest denominator is like, okay, be active on LinkedIn, for example, like that's, but then, as soon as you've done that, then the next step is, okay, you need to have some kind of, drip campaigns, or you need to have like awareness, nurturing, those type of things. Where do you like see that the 80-20 of good marketing strategy would be? Like, where is it that, because the bigger you are, the more complex and hard it will be, but definitely. For like a lean scale up, like what is it that they can do better? And like, when you talk about measuring things and KPIs, what do you feel like is the KPI that is mostly overlooked?
I think most of them, but I think the first thing is always to define why is it that we're doing what we're doing. I think a lot of marketeers, and also like in startups as well, they've just adopted what they expect that someone should care about in their role. So they haven't really gone in and said, okay, if I look at a customer journey from, being someone who we've never engaged with before, coming into some sort of relationship with us, they've gone to our website, they've read about us somewhere, they've talked to someone, they bought our product, they tried our product, they returned our product, they bought another product, they churned, we want to get them back. So having that more holistic perspective on it, and then defining those, like, what is it that I want them to do? What is it that I want to be for my customer in those different steps? And I think marketing will change at some point to being more CX, because marketing isn't just, I have a product I want you to buy, so I'll send you messages until you buy that product. I think that's what marketing has been doing for a long while, right? I just keep sending you, like, please, buy my product. Now it's cheaper. Like, now you can get it for free. Now you can get, like, I try to, but that's not how business works, right? It's not like, I don't wake up like, oh, cool, like shoes. I should buy some shoes, right? You could maybe, but it doesn't work for insurance. It doesn't work for banking. It doesn't work for pensions. It doesn't work for, so I think understanding your customers what is it that they're trying to get out of you as a provider, and how do you provide on their needs? And then maybe also getting a little bit out of the whole like, no, this isn't my role. I'm in marketing. Well, I'm in customer service. I'm in sales. I'm in whatever, because it's all the same thing, right? It's the same customer.
Yeah, I think that the transformation that CMOs are having, or have had, to actually have a seat at the table and do data-driven marketing. I think the next role for that is like the chief customer experience officer.
Yeah, something like that.
That's a combination of the digital sales, commercial, marketing role, like cross-functional, because that's the only thing that makes sense.
I have one of my customers who is a CMO. He sits in customer service like once a month. He just spends like 2 hours in customer service. Sometimes he even talks with people, but most of the time he just listens in on people's conversation, and he actually uses that for his marketing automation. So not just like not campaigns and stuff, but for marketing automation. So there's a gap here. Like, we should be better at communicating this part, or people are doubting if we can deliver on, or people have uncertainties about this. And you could say, is that marketing? It's sales, because you're sort of alleviating a concern your customers have. It's customer service because you're doing the same, but it's also marketing. So the lines are getting a little bit more blurry. I think that's a good thing. But I think that if you look at how companies are structured, most, especially, older companies, are not ready to have those lines get all blurred, right? Because you will still have someone, you're responsible for sales, you're responsible for marketing, you're responsible for customer service, you have different KPIs, we're measuring on different levels, and then it becomes difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was when we were working together, like there was many times we went into a workshop, and it was the first time that marketing, sales, customer service was sitting together and actually talking about their customers, right? So it's.
I can give you. I mean, I went into a large financial institution. We were presenting. And that was when I was at Oracle. We were talking about like CRM, marketing automation, and we were talking to this financial institution. I think there were like 30 people sitting in listening from IT and from the business and stuff. And we were doing this whole day inspiration. What can you do and stuff. And then we had like a break for coffee. And then the guy came up and he was asking a couple of questions. I was like, oh, what's your role? No, I'm responsible for CRM within this business. I was like, oh, cool. And then another guy came up like right afterwards, and he was like listening in and shaking his head like, oh, cool. And asking him questions and asking me questions, and we were having this whole conversation. And then I was like, oh, what do you do? And then he also asked the other guy, and basically he said, well, I do CRM for this business. But I thought he did. Oh, no, I do. No, I do. And basically, they've never been introduced to each other. So basically, they were two people doing the same thing who's never talked to each other before. And they both thought they were actually responsible for CRM within this business, but they've never met before. So,
yeah, the beautiful thing about doing business is that it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are, where you are in your journey. It's always pretty much a dumpster fire. Like it's like it doesn't. That's my comfort blanket.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where like startups have a great advantage over bigger businesses. Like enterprises have they have the muscle, they have the people, they have the economy to scale and everything else. But they just have so much legacy that they have to clean up, right? Both in processes, people, technology, and stuff. Where startups have a much more lean way of working, right? So they can just be much more agile and just, we want to do something new, and they don't have to take care of like 50 people who do the same thing and stuff. So I think there's advantages for both.
So you've gone from Oracle, Salesforce, Treasure Data, which is a very software sales roles.
Oh yeah.
And now you're on the consulting side. What has been your biggest takeaway? Like, if you went back, and would you change anything the way that you were working as a salesperson now when you're a consultant?
Yes, I would. I think your KPIs and what you're measured on are obviously different. But I think from moving to the consultancy side and being in different types of conversations, because when you work as a AE at a SaaS business or a technology vendor, like everything you say has to lead up to the customer buying something, right? I think that's kind of a thing that most AEs won't really admit. But at the end of the day, you need to sell something to the customer, right? So you can talk about like workshops and let's do the posters on the wall and everything else, but it has to lead into you buying the technology that you represent, right? Whereas one of the things that I realized going over to the consulting business is that it's just a tool, right? It's if you're trying to build a house, you can buy the best drill ever, but it doesn't really matter if you don't know how to use it, right? I can buy the most expensive Makita drill, give it to my 9-year-old, and he wouldn't be able to build a house. No matter how good the tool is, it doesn't really matter. So I think that's kind of something that I knew kind of before, but I've really gotten into the whole like the processes, the rules, the people, like why is it that they're not getting the value from the technology that they're buying, and not being so much about the technology itself. The technology itself has to be able to accommodate for your needs and your what you need it to do. But I don't think I've ever seen something that didn't become a success because of the limitations of the technology.
I feel that every tool that every company is using is usually used to maybe 40% of its capabilities. And I think
that's high.
You think it's high?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, when I was at Salesforce, me and a colleague of mine who you also know, we actually did like tests, like maybe like once a year or something, where we actually ask our customers, like, if this is the technology you bought from us, like this is 100%, how much of the technology do you think you're utilizing? I think people were around like 10, 15%. I think the most we had was someone saying 30%. And they said that because they were using it to send out SMS. So, I think that most companies know that they're not taking advantage of the technology that they bought into.
Yeah, so like that's so like when we're talking about AI, we're talking about processes, we're talking about like it feels like if you just had one person, you say like you're now to use like Trump language, you're now the.
I knew we'll get there.
Yeah,
eventually.
We won't go deeper into that.
That's good.
But like you're now the Salesforce czar. Like your only job is to increase the adoption and the functionality usage of Salesforce. Or like my worst tool is probably LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Like I wouldn't go without it, but I'm probably using like 10%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's another thing that I think companies are really, I wouldn't say good at, but another thing that I talked to someone about is when you buy stuff, you're really good at doing like an RFP and you do like your demands and what does it need to do and stuff. And you have this whole process of the technology that you're buying. But I think sometimes companies should also do the same for their ability to take advantage of it. I think that's often missing. So I've done a lot of RFPs and so have you, right? And they sometimes ask a little bit about it, but they should actually do like a vendor selection of themselves, as in, do I have my data in place? Is IT on board? Is legal on board? Do I have enough people to do this? Do I have consultants that's going to help me, or I'm going to do everything myself, right? I think that's also something that a lot of companies could be better at. It's actually sort of understanding their own business and their own ability to adopt something. Because I think a lot of companies had just bought into technology because they need new technology, but they haven't really done the due diligence on their own ability to adopt it. I think that's also why they don't get advantage of it, because they haven't really considered what does it actually take to take advantage of this.
But is it more like, so what, you're talking about processes, people, and all like things like, have you seen any trends like of this is something that if more people would think about this, they would probably be better at using their tools. They would probably have efficiency gains and all that. Before they start talking about AI agents, they could probably start there, right?
Yeah, I think they should do like a, what are we, take inventory, right? most companies take inventory of their stock and everything else, right? But just also take inventory of your, like, the data I would need to have in place to be able to do so, the people I would need to have in place, the processes, the responsibilities. I think that's one of the things that's a key thing that people sort of neglect, is who is responsible for getting this implemented, getting it adopted, who's doing the change management, right? So I think oftentimes, we talk about CDPs a lot, right? And then it's usually marketing who's saying, no, we're going to buy a CDP and we're going to get all of our customer data, and we're going to get product data, and we're going to get delivery data, we're going to get weather data, they're going to get all these things, right? And then we're going to do these amazing campaigns. And then they buy the tool because they went to some event that Salesforce or Adobe or someone else did, see some great case on stage that is probably half true probably, and then they come back and say, like, I spent $1 million, I bought this tool, now we're going to be omni-channel, we're going to do everything, we're going to be data-driven, everything else, and then the rest of the organization is like, yeah, transportation data, that's not really available. Like product data, yeah, we have an ERP system that's been around for like 45 years, and we actually have like 15 of them, and they don't talk to each other, and they probably can't. And then we also like weather data, no, because that's real-time data, and we're not allowed to get, then afterwards they come to the realization, like, okay, that's not available. Okay, but at least I can do X, Y, and Z. But like, no, you can't, because you don't have anyone who does SQL. You don't have anyone who can do like Python. You don't have so you realize like, oh, I bought the tool, but I really don't have the capabilities of actually, taking advantage of it.
Yeah. I see. I think that's one of the things I kept saying to the clients that I had when I was in Salesforce, that who's sitting with the KPI. Is there a center of excellence? Like if there was a center of excellence, the Salesforce platform was used fantastically. Like it was, that's the reason why it's number one CRM in the world. And I see that now as well. Now I'm doing Salesforce negotiations, renewals, and those things. When it goes left, it's usually because someone has bought something, and that they probably maybe they needed, because it's a significant chunk of investment, so there's a lot of people that said yes to it, but there was not someone who actually had a KPI against themselves about making this a success. So then and especially in the Salesforce world has been the Revenue Cloud part, because it ties into so many different departments. So it's not only marketing or only sales. Like legal needs to be involved. IT needs to be involved. It's just, and that's in the end you see that Spider-Man meme.
Everyone's pointing at each other.
Yeah, and it's and then things is not going great. And
but it leads back to the whole value, right? If you don't have any KPIs, how are you a success, right? If you don't know what you're measured on, if you don't know, you're buying a tool, but you haven't really decided on what it's going to solve for you. Also, when are you done? Right? A lot of saying that we're doing a 6 months implementation and then we're done. Are you really done? If it's a data platform, if it's customer experience, that will change. How we did customer experience 10 years ago isn't the same today, and in 2 years' time, also because of AI, right, it's going to be different. So you're never really done. And I think that's kind of taking a step back, redoing why did we buy it? Who was going to, get what from it? Are our customer changing? Are we changing? Do we still have the organization in place? I think people or companies kind of neglect to take inventory once in a while for their investments. I think one of the things we got a request from someone who was actually asking us to do so we do a lot of vendor selections. So companies come to us and say, we need a new CRM, we need an MA tool, we need a CDP, can you talk to these different vendors? And we do demos and stuff like that. We help them with use cases. But one of our customers actually asked us to do the opposite. So they're saying we have 40 plus technologies in place. Can you help us do inventory of do we use them? Do we need them? Who uses them? Are they still up and running? Do they talk to each other? Can you sort of so and that's because IT is getting more involved. But I think that's something we'll also see, especially from scale-ups. So you and I actually work together on a company that has been a huge success, and they've scaled out globally and everything else. And every time they got into a new need they needed, they would buy a new tool, right? So now we need to do social media advertising, we'll buy a tool for that. We need to do surveys, we'll buy a tool for that. We need to do so they just kept buying tools, and they did that in different countries because they were really moving fast. And now they're saying okay, now we have all these tools in place. Are we still using them? And when we do these type of things, we always find stuff that basically people haven't logged into for 6 months because it's just something that's there. Someone needed it, the person left. There was a new shiny object, so we're not using it anymore. And I think we'll see more and more of that. And I think that's one of the things where I think IT has a really. IT can be a friend and a foe in a lot of these things. When I was at Salesforce, I found them a little bit annoying because they always did their due diligence. They were always finding these we can't do this, and there's restrictions, and we need to get it into Azure and everything else. But I see more and more they're really good at understanding costs. They're really good at understanding if we do this, it will have an impact on that. So I think marketing is growth. It's how do we expand the business? How do we do more? How do we build more? How do we make more money? And IT is often how do we make sure that we're profitable? That we don't overinvest. That people, Yeah.
What about where does procurement sit in all this?
I mean, procurement is necessary, I guess. I hope that they're getting more educated on what it is that especially within these IT or technology and AI and stuff. I think it's difficult sometimes. I mean, I think I told you this, but I had a very large Danish customer, and we had these really long negotiations with especially these two ladies from procurement, and we went to their office I don't know, every week for 6 weeks or something, and I always felt the discussions were really bad, right? They were really hesitant, and they didn't really say anything, and they had their arms crossed. And I was then we can give you a better price on this, or you can get more contacts, or storage will and they were yeah, and back and forth. And then at some point, the younger one and I, we went out for coffee, and then she was like, "Can I tell you something? But you can't tell my boss." I said, "Yeah, sure." We usually buy toilet paper and, stuff, right? We buy physical stuff. All the things you're talking about, all the things we're negotiating about, every time you leave the room, we have to go in and Google what the hell you're talking about. So the negotiation is really weird because it's you say something, you expect that I understand it, but I don't understand what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no idea if you're giving me the right price. I have no idea if I'm meeting the demands that the business is having. Is this what they asked for? If he gives me a discount on this, is the product getting worse than what they are expecting in the business? And the business doesn't know, right? They're I don't know, the guy told me to buy this, right? So that honesty shifted the conversation. And I think that's a realization that I hope and I think that procurement will need to have, is to be transparent about, they know what they know, but there are also stuff that they don't know. And then either get educated or get some help from someone who actually understands, what it is they're trying to buy.
I think that's one of the hard things that we have found now when we're helping organizations negotiate the Salesforce contracts. I used to say okay, you want to optimize your Salesforce budget. You want to get more Salesforce for your budget.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it's a difference in maturity. So you could be a very big company like the one you mentioned and have low maturity in your procurement, or you have, you're a small company, but for some reason you have a procurement manager that is, has been working in Salesforce before. So he has a high, Salesforce knowledge. And this that's been hard to we know exactly which companies that are a good fit to get our services. It's, very clear.
Yeah.
If you have X amount of revenue, if you're, this amount of people, if you're growing that much, then you will benefit from our services.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, significant percentages that we can help our clients with in the renewals. But to find the buying persona within these organizations. Sometimes it's the CFO, sometimes it's the CIO, sometimes it's the CTO, some
CDO,
CPO,
yeah.
CDO. Like it's just, oh no, this head of procurement. I think that's really been a little bit of a challenge. You have been, top performer, like consistent, like it was a blessing having you as in my team. When you had your Salesforce admin on control.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Had to go there.
Always.
Yeah.
Can't let that go.
I was out with my customers and I was not updating my CRM. That was...
and that's probably why you were also top performer.
Exactly.
But, 2 questions. One, what do you think is the key to be consistently overperforming? Like, what do you say to, young AEs?
Yeah.
And 2, like, we're talking about procurement and those things, like, what's the counter on that? Like, what's the opposite? Because you, as you said earlier, the KPI is to grow. Like, so how should you counter that from an AE perspective?
Yeah. I'll do the first one. So how do you, yes, I've been blessed, I've been lucky, but I think it's also because I've had systems like all my career. And I think that's the way that I sort of function. I need to have something where sales is actually pretty easy if you look at it. I mean, it's easy to understand, it's difficult to master. But basically, sales is that you have different steps that you need to go through. And once you've gone through all those steps, and we can get into the MedPick stuff or 25 questions or whatever. But if you go through the steps that you need, you will be successful. And I've sort of like always understood that. So my career in sales started off by me being, so I'm educated within the shipping business, and I was working with, so when my education ended, I was working with the sales director for this company, and he was like, you're a little bit wet behind the ears, so we want to hire you for sales, but I want you to get some experience. And I was like, I don't know, 18 or something. And he was like, I want to send you out to the most difficult job I can think of. And at that time, it was selling ads in phone books for like the local electrician or like the pizzeria stuff, right? And for the younger people listening in, like you had these books where you could look in and then you can find like a carpenter or whatever. And basically that's what he said. So he said, like, go out, have a year, sell these ads. If you're a success, I have a role for you where you can manage this whole area within yourself. I was like, I'm gonna smash my numbers and then I'm gonna be like a success. And pretty early on, I just figured out like it was pretty easy, right? The more people I called, the more yeses I got to a meeting, the more business I closed. So basically, and I know it's going to sound very cliche and it's something right down your alley, right? But I just knew every time I got a no, I was just closer to the next yes. So basically, I just went ham. I just went completely crazy. I just called everyone I can get a hold of. And I just kept at it. And I did like my math, which was like, if you call 100 people, 10 of them will say yes to a meeting. 2 of them will actually buy something. Okay, but my quota is this, so I could do the reverse engineering, and then I just knew how many people I needed to call. So it was pretty easy for me. So I just have these systems. When I went into enterprise sale, I did the same thing. It wasn't a volumes game, but it was like get a hold of a person who has this responsibility, who has these concerns, who need this technology, understand like do you have any economic, like, can you buy stuff? Do you have legal? Like, go through the motions and you will be successful. It's not that difficult. It's difficult to execute on, but it's not difficult to understand. So when you ask, like, and yes, I didn't always, put it into the CRM system, but I did actually do all these things. And I did actually have like a list of, the reason why I didn't close this sale was because I didn't know that they had like a deadline for this, or I didn't understand the compelling event, or I didn't know who to talk to about this different like things, right? So it's annoying for new salespeople, but there's a reason why these frameworks sort of exist. If you keep at it and you go through the motions, you have your point of view and all those things that salespeople really hate. But if you do that consistently, you will make your number.
Yeah, no shortcuts.
You can always, like, people can get lucky, right? There's a bluebird. I had a couple of those, unfortunately. But no, there's no shortcut. It's hard work. It's a grind. And I think one of the key things for good salespeople is that we're quite lazy. I think that's not a bad thing. I think it's actually a pretty good thing because we always find the path of least resistance. Like people, like there's a saying in Denmark where you shouldn't jump over the fence where it's lowest. It's like, why? Why wouldn't I? Like, why would I go to where it's highest? It doesn't make any sense. Like so we try to find like how can I get the most bang for my buck? Like how can I have the least effort and get most out of it? I think that's actually a quality of salespeople.
And like when I agree, and like if there's only one, I mean, Cyber Monday shoppers are pretty allergic to friction, and then on a close second is salespeople. Like the minute there's any friction, it's like hands up in the air, just let me sell, man.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is I'm not sure if it's a causation, but it's definitely a correlation between the worse you are at admin, the better you are in sales. And
it's probably unpopular, but I think there's it's if you look at someone's desktop and it's all clean, then they're not doing anything. Right? That's kind of my like. If you look at someone and their desk is all clean, there's nothing, like they're probably not doing anything, right? So if someone is really good at updating Salesforce and they have everything in place and they're forecasting and next steps and everything else, if that's always on point, that's because they're not talking to enough people, because you can't do both, and it's a volumes game. So you have to be out there and you have to do like those different motions.
Yeah, I don't want to agree, but I kind of do. Like it's if you ask my bosses when I was an AE, I also was terrible at updating Salesforce. I just didn't tell you when I was in.
You should.
So like
the procurement thing.
Yeah, procurement thing. You're also like now you've been helping a lot of clients out like in software. Like when do you think it's smart to like what should you do as a client to make sure that you are, prepping yourself as a client to have the best outcome in your renewal?
I think it's, again, like if you don't have the resources yourself, go out to a consultancy, but have someone do something besides what they usually do, and then have a look at how much of the technology are we utilizing? Are all the integrations in place? Are we compliant? We did an RFP at some point, and in that RFP, we probably had some sort of goals, right? There's a reason why we issued the RFP. We probably stated it within the RFP. So you did your due diligence where you bought it, but when you do your renewal, you should go back and say like, yeah, we wanted to lift our online conversions with 10%. Have we done so? And if we haven't, why haven't we done so? Is it the technology? Is it the adoption? Is it the people, processes? Is it legal? Is it COVID or Trump or whatever? But just go through all of those things to understand, like, how do we go into this negotiation? Is it something we should negotiate on? I think also sometimes it's, and I understand why, because most procurement people are obviously paid by how much they can save. But I think sometimes it's just like you're going into a negotiation trying to save as much as possible. And on the other side, you have someone saying, well, if you want to save something, what should I get from that, right? So you're actually cutting down on the licenses and you're getting a worse product, right? I've dealt with a lot of procurement people in my time. And I had especially one guy, and we had this very long contract and going back and forth, and we always had, I don't know why, but he always called me at night, like at 9 o'clock in the evening or 10 o'clock in the evening, and it was also like he was always really aggressive. Like we were always arguing. I was like, why is this guy so aggressive? Like, aren't we trying to get to the same goal here? And then at some point, I don't know, I didn't snap, but I was just like, can you please tell me why you're always so aggressive with me? Like, what's going on? Yeah, but you need to give me the best price, and I'm going to negotiate you till you cry, and you have to tell your manager that. I was like, holy shit. And then I thought, like, let me try and, like, change the conversation a bit. So I was like, okay, let me be completely honest with you. This is what I care about in this negotiation. I care about when are you going to sign the contract, how long a contract are you going to sign, and how much are you going to, pay. That's it. So I care about velocity. I care about, like, I've told my boss that you will sign a contract at this date. That's actually most what I care about. And he was like, yeah, but I want more discount. I say, okay, but what is it that you care about? Like, what's your goals? It's like, yeah, how much discount I can get. Like, okay, but you haven't actually seen, like, our list pricing, because we don't really have any list pricing. oh, how much discount am I getting? I was like, I don't know, 10%. Yeah, if you can give me like 20%, I can sign the contract tomorrow. I was like, is that it? Yeah, that's all I'm being measured on. I was like, okay, cool, sure. And then I went back, asked my manager, asked, deal desk, whatever, came back with a discount, and we got the deal signed. Maybe it wasn't like the day after, but it was like within a week or two. And the conversation was like, from that, we had like a really good working relationship because he knew what I cared about. He would use that, right? He was like, hey, if you give me this, I will sign the contract. When did you tell your boss it was going to get signed? Like, on the 20th? Okay, I'll sign it on the 19th, but then you have to give me this. But the conversation just, it was completely different from that. And I think it was because we didn't align the negotiation beforehand. I think that was a really big epiphany for me, is to align your goals with my goals, and then we can sort of see where can we make things happen. Because the final goal was to get the deal done, right?
I think also there's a difference when an AE is overperforming or know that they will hit their targets versus when they're scrambling. Because it's like what to sound a little bit like a hippie, what frequency are you vibrating on? So like if you're coming in and you're desperate for a deal, you have this is not a nice vibe, and you're also not, probably unless you're very experienced, able to take a step back and have this conversation. Right. Whereas when you're relaxed, comfortable, experienced, you very easily can say, like what I've said now in the negotiations that I run is like we're not sitting opposite each other. Like we're sitting on the same side of the table, and the problem is laying in front of us. So like how can we work together to solve this? Like we have certain challenges to what's happening. Like they can be perceived. Like they don't like often there's not necessarily that it's anything that is super wrong, but it's just that that's a story that has been told in the boardroom, and that's become the truth.
Yes.
And unfortunately for the software vendor, that's now the truth.
Exactly.
So you are now, congratulations, you have to solve this truth.
Yes.
And it's like
I mean, I had a manager who would always say, like, is this something you know, or is it something you think? Right? It was like, yeah, it's probably something I think, right? Yeah, they're not going to sign within. Is that something you know or something you think, right? So I think we have a tendency of telling ourselves something, and then we can convince ourselves of something that's maybe not necessarily always true.
Yeah. I also, like, one of the things that I've noticed as well is that especially like in Salesforce negotiations and renewals, the perception from clients is that they can do a negotiation in like 3 months. Like and it's just not true. Like it's like unless you have a plan, preferably I would like you to have a plan and a roadmap and done the audits that you talked about like 6 to 12 months before renewal. And if we can then talk marketing terms, if we can drip this information in, and it can be is it actually true? Like are you really unhappy with something? A lot of times enterprise clients are unhappy with things. That's just the nature of software as a service. But then can also be perceived unhappiness. And if it's not real unhappiness and it's perceived unhappiness, then it's even more important that you actually raise this before. Because if you don't, like the person that you need is the Salesforce AE to sell this internally. And if you come 3 months before renewal, their manager will be like, why haven't you raised this before? This should have been a red account. This should have been like, why are, now you as a client has made your champion, the AE, look bad. And it's almost impossible to get something done.
I don't know if it's changed because it's been a while since I worked there, but I think one of the issues you have as an AE, I think it's also a matter of perception, but as an AE, you get a quota, you sign a contract with a company, and then you don't really have anything to do with that company, really, unless they want to buy more stuff. Then, you're going to sell them, or you have like an ECS or something who can help you out. But you don't really have a responsibility for that customer, right? And the customers sometimes think so. So I can actually see that today. So one of the things that our customers use me for is actually being like the bridge into Salesforce and saying like, we want to have this sort of thing. our AE doesn't know how to answer it. Like, isn't there like a customer success manager and stuff? And most companies in the Nordics actually don't get a customer success manager necessarily. So the issues that you're talking about won't actually get any attention. And then you go into the negotiation 3 months before, a month before, and then you just like go out there and say, yeah, we're unhappy about this. And like, why didn't you raise this? Well, we kind of did, but no one actually listened to what we were saying. So I think that's also part of the issue, is having that like conversation, that ongoing conversation. And if you can't have that with your technology vendor, then again, being an old AE, but then find a consultant that sort of has that, they stand outside of your business. They can have the outside in and look at your business and be neutral about it. And then they can help you sort of get those things in place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we're having a webinar on the 14th of August where we're going to go like, what type of leverage can you use? And the reason why it's on the 14th of August is because it's 6 months before it needs to have that contract date. 14th of February signed, 31st of January. Then then you're sorted, and it's absolutely like the last like 5-6 months. It's like, if you're gonna move a needle, now is the time to do so.
I mean, I think, talking about Salesforce, right? It's usually you talk about Sales Cloud or Service Cloud, but usually Sales Cloud, right? And I think when people are unhappy with the CRM system, it's usually not the system itself; it's the adoption.
Yeah,
we haven't adopted it. We don't get any value from it. I can't trust the numbers. My AEs don't want to update their it's so. Doesn't matter what you do as a tech vendor, right? Because if they don't adopt the technology, it doesn't really matter. So I think that's also part of the things that you need to be aware of. If you're going out and selling technology, like, what happens once the customer buy what you're selling them? Like, how do you make sure that it's adopted, that it's used to its full potential? So when you get to the renewal stage, you don't have that stupid conversation of, well, the tool doesn't work. Yeah, it does, but you haven't adopted it. Like, none of your people have updated it for like 6 months. So what did you expect?
Yeah.
So maybe AI will help with that. I think it will actually at some point, but I think it's usually it's just adoption.
Yeah, and it's also like the way that it's set up, like from a sales structure perspective, like a lot of AEs are being changed every year, every other year, and that's because they want them to try to close everything they can in the current year. So it's like the person that you have as your actual sponsor is like at the lowest level RVP, because that's at least some consistency there.
Definitely.
And it's just like, it's hard.
I think that's also like one of the, I wouldn't say the mistakes that the tech vendors do, but it's at least something that makes life a little bit more difficult for them. That they have this, like, you don't know if you still work with this customer in a year's time. So you talked about, having some calm and, but the issue is, you have 12 months to make your quota. Your quota is 12 months, right? So from today and in 12 months' time, I need to sell something. So you can't be strategic. You can't really be like, yeah, I'm probably not going to sell something this year, but next year we've matured, we've gone into workshop, because it's probably not going to be your account. Right? So you're not incentivizing your AEs to think at a strategic level. You're incentivizing them to be very tactical, right? I mean, if you have like a global account manager, they know they're probably going to work with it. But most AEs at Salesforce and Oracle and Treasure Data, you would only know that you have this patch for 12 months, and you would just need to squeeze the most out of it as you probably could, right? And I think that's maybe also a little bit, I don't know if it's wrong, I don't know how you would do it differently, but it at least doesn't encourage strategic selling.
I think it's because, like when you're also grown to a size that Salesforce is, it's very hard to do it differently now. And I mean, they have things that we keep hearing from companies is like, it's becoming so complex to buy. They change names, they change products, they change everything. So even, how does Agentforce being priced?
They just changed it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I was about to say something I shouldn't have said, so
I saved you.
Yeah, thank you. But but it's that kind of like, it's a complexity, it's a tax on the unknown.
Yes,
and it's by design to do so, because then you forces the AE to take chances, and they know, like, Keith Block, who was the COO, like it was 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. He said that we want, the products to be so sticky that if we churn and have attrition on Marketing Cloud, they will still be buying Commerce Cloud.
Yeah.
And that's the Oracle playbook, right? It doesn't matter.
That's also where it came from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like it doesn't matter how much you, we know that we can piss off a client in this next 12 months because we will have another 12 to 18 to 24 months to sell them something new or save this relationship. Yeah. So, because it's, that's also like why you don't have leverage if you start a renewal in 3 months because nothing's going to happen in 3 months.
But it's not very customer centric, right? And I think that's also like, when I was at Salesforce and Oracle, like we had so many SKUs. I don't know if you remember, we had like millions of SKUs that we have to sort of understand, and you could price some with others and some you couldn't. And if you add this, you had to, and if you applied, like it was so complicated, right? I sometimes remember I work with, and she's an AE there right now, so, shout out to her, but Caroline, and we worked together on some of these larger deals, and we would spend like hours and hours and hours and days on building quotes and sending them out and getting like, you couldn't do this, and then we change something and it would break the system and stuff, right? And I remember her and I talking about like, if this is so difficult for us to send out an offer for a procurement person, imagine being on the other side, right? One day you're buying toilet paper, and the other day you're looking at this quote and you're like, holy, like, I don't understand any of this, right? So I think it's also like that whole dynamic is also difficult to be in, right?
Yes, but just a simple thing that when you bought, it was called Pardot. Yeah. And then it's called Salesforce Engagement,
exactly.
Like, no, now it's...
now it's Marketing Cloud Engagement, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And see, I can't even keep track.
No,
and then, or like high velocity sales. Yeah. No, it's not that anymore. It just continues to
but
change.
At the consultancy I work with at One Marketing, we do get asked sometimes, like, can you help us like scope? Like, sometimes they ask me to negotiate, and I've sort of said, no, that's not, that wouldn't be fair. I'm not going to negotiate on your behalf, but I will help you understand your needs. I think that's also something, again, I'm not going to, plug you or me or our business too much. I think I've done that a lot, but I think just, again, there's a reason why consultancies exist, and that's because they know something specific about something specific, right? Yeah. You can't insource everything. You can't be an expert on everything. I think that's what some of the companies right now are struggling with, is that they want to understand everything themselves, but they can't. So especially if you want to do like scoping, do I have everything in place? Do I understand? Like, I remember when I was at Treasure Data, scoping was so difficult because it was based on consumption. So basically you would go in and talk to procurement and saying like, on your current demands, this will be your consumption the next 3 years. And then procurement would say like, okay, but can our demands change? Yeah, sure, they probably will. Okay, how much is it going to cost us? We don't know, depends. Yeah, but what if, depends. What if we buy a competitor? Oof. Okay, what if we sell off some business? Well, it'll still be the same cost, right? So procurement also, like, again, we're talking a lot about procurement, but it's also really difficult for them to understand, like, what are the mechanics that actually go into it, because they don't understand everything that goes into that pricing.
No, I think like a good common advice is to buy for what you need now, not for what you need in the future. And then, like, because it's then at least you can protect the upside, the downside, and more than, because it's usually from experience, it's better to know that you're going to use all the licenses than to get a really good price and buy more than you need.
I agree.
Because everything takes time, and like it's the Hofstadter principle, like like that it's gonna take longer to build that house, so you try to forecast another 3 months, but even because you knew it will still take longer. So
but it's back to the incentives, right? Because I also had negotiations where procurement would say like, what if I buy like this amount? Would I get a higher discount? And I would be like, yeah, but you don't need this much. Yeah, but, would I get a higher discount if we could? At some point, we probably will. And that's also, again, back to the conversation I had with the guy. I was like, why do you want to buy more than you actually need? Well, because I get a higher discount if I do so. So that's also like going back to the incentives, right? It's just, there's this whole, like, it's a little bit weird.
But I think that's what I like about that is it comes back to values. Because it's... And if you meet someone, like you're out drinking a beer, and then this person comes up to you and say like, I'm a really nice guy. Like the first thing you will think is like, okay, and then he keeps repeating this, I'm a very nice guy. And then like at a point you will be like, nice guys don't need to tell,
No, exactly.
like, okay, you just act like a nice guy, and I'll think you're a nice guy until you prove otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
And like when a company keeps on having one word values, it's like trust is our number one, or customer centricity is number one, or values, company values cannot be one worded. I mean that's so for our business in the procurement side, we said that we want to have long-term relationships over short-term gains. So because it's very easy, like when you're in a negotiation and you're a consultant, to like you can dial up a thing. You can say like, okay, you actually got a really good deal here because you did this, and it oftentimes, like if you're an AE, you can stand behind that. You're like, but if you were the founder of that company that is selling this, like you might have to have a little bit of a different approach. The same as, that's why I love the meta values. It's like you move fast and break things. Like they're willing to break things to move fast, and it has to be like you have to have a counter to a value, or else it doesn't mean anything. Like trust. Okay, what are you sacrificing to get the trust?
Exactly.
What are you sacrificing for innovation? And like, we're
we're secure and everything.
There needs to be something as a counterpart there.
One of the things I've also like in negotiations, because I've done a lot of them, right? And at some point I was like, I remember, because it's software, right? So basically you can, as an AE, you can't give 50% discount, but then you can go to your manager and they can go to their manager, and I'm not going to give out, but sometimes you can give pretty hefty discounts, right?
Massive discounts.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, how would I, like if I went into a car dealership, right? I was like, I like this Audi. How much is it? It's 100K. No, that's too much. Okay, 50K. I'll be like, what the hell's wrong with the car? Like, why are you willing to give me like half of what you said before, right? I think that's also like the negotiation part, that you go in and if that's the case, then you haven't really discussed the value of what you're buying. Then you're basically just buying a tool and not, what it's going to solve for.
Yeah. So I think like one of the things that we're talking about in the webinar, because I just started like finishing the first draft, is that don't assume that the list prices, because everyone is having really good deals. So like the current should be your floor, and then that's
exactly.
then you should
start over.
Then you should start over again. It's
but list pricing, like I get it for like materials things, right? You have a car, that you have tires and you have metal and you have like, and that makes sense. But for technology, it's like it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit like it's just something you think of, right?
But if, I had Ulrik here on the podcast, who's like a SaaS pricing consultant, and it's what I've learned when talking with him and reading his book is like when you have too complex of a bundle, then discounting will be very easy, because like if a very simple example for myself is that I use a parallel dialer, and since I'm dialing internationally from a US perspective, I am on the enterprise segment. But the enterprise segment has 25 users or something like that, and I'm only needing one.
Yeah.
So so they had to discount insane to get for me to buy it.
Exactly.
Whereas they could have made it, what problem are they solving?
Exactly.
So if you have problem-based pricing, then it's easier, and you don't get these
weird.
Yeah, and also like it just becomes there's. As an AE in these big software companies, you're assuming already that you can, the list price is not the list price, because you will always you will start on 40% discounts. The first deal you send over is a 40% discount. And it's like, okay, thank you for 40%, but what is this?
Exactly.
And then
you're devaluating the value, right? So it's like, why are you giving me 40% discount? Well,
Yeah, and also tip for all the A's that is listening out there: when you're negotiating, be consistent in your negotiate. Like think about where you want to end up first, and then like make a plan on how you're gonna end up there.
Yeah.
Because like if you are giving schizophrenic pricing throughout the negotiation, you're kind of resetting the baseline every time. You're like, oh, you give 10%, then you push and you get 8%, and you push again and you get 20%. You're like, okay, I should just keep on pushing because every time I push, I get more discounts. Like it needs at least to seem logical. Like
but I think that's where pricing come in. You have like deal desk who should help you out with that, but you do get some liberties when you're an AE, right? So you're right. I think it's like consistency is key.
It's pretty funny. If you would go back in time and give yourself some advice, like when you were slinging Yellow Pages ads, back there. Like, is it anything that you would have upskilled yourself in earlier, or anything that you would have like any traits that you would have wanted to pick up earlier?
I think I would have appreciated the hustle more. I think that's one of the things that I really value about myself, is that I went through that process of having like, I did have days where I would call like 100, 150 companies, have like 150 people like basically hanging up on me. And then I knew the next day I would probably only have to call like 50 before I got a call or talk to someone.
The sales got blessed you on the second day for your
exactly.
reference.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's something that I've taken with me afterwards. I think like appreciating the hustle. When I've also helped like hire people. And the best AEs in those type of companies are always the ones who used to be a BDR. Like BDRs going into ECS roles, going into AE roles. My experience is those are always the best salespeople because they know the grind. They know they need to pick up the phone. They can't just sit around and wait and hope and stuff. They actually know that it takes effort. So I think that's I would have appreciated that much more than I've actually done. I mean, I was annoyed and sad and stuff, but I would have liked to have seen it more as a learning experience.
Yeah, I guess that's the wisdom that you get with age. Yeah. How do you feel now? Like, do you do a lot of grind now?
No, not at all. No. I just sit around, wait for... No, I mean, I think the difference is when you do consultancy, right? So basically, my role as a commercial lead is to sell my consultants and architects into companies, right? And that takes more because when you sell software, you have like a product, right? It's not physical, but it's something they can log in, they can watch demos, you can feel it, right? And if you buy a consultant, basically you're buying a person that you feel can add as much value as you do yourself. So it's much more trust-based in a lot of ways, right? You're trusting this person with your data, you're trusting that they will deliver, you're trusting them with, the things that we're trying to achieve and stuff. So it's maybe a little longer, but it's also very much about setting us as a brand of someone who has done this before. I mean, one of the things that we really emphasize a lot on when we onboard new customers is that we help them take risk out of projects. So we've done it before. We've made we don't do mistakes, obviously, but if we had, we take a lot of risk out of the project. We help you. We don't have to align internally with politics. We don't have to listen to the one who shouts the most. We can stay out of it, but we take a lot of risk out of the project for you. And I think that's what people buy from us. But if you're going to buy someone who helps you take risk out of a project, you have to trust them.
Yeah.
So it's much more trust-based. So I can't just call 100 companies and hope that they will buy our services because it wouldn't make sense.
And I think that's, like coming from the SaaS world and now also doing consultancy, it's like in the SaaS world, everyone knows the deal. Like, so you call someone up, you highlight the pain point, you ask if that person is feeling that pain point. They might either agree or they don't agree. If they agree, you book a meeting, and then you in that meeting you do a little bit more discovery. You show how you solve that pain point, and then you get more stakeholders involved, and you close the deal.
Exactly.
Like that's and everybody has agreed that this is the way we're doing it. No problem.
Yeah.
It's in consultancy, like which is new to me. Like if you would do the same, I'm basically calling you up. It's like, hey David, I you do Salesforce renewal negotiations already today, but I can do it better.
Yeah.
And you don't know me, but just trust me on that.
Exactly.
And they're like, well, I'm not even listening to you right now, because it's like, so like, what, how are you, what type of, process do you have when you're like, okay, these are the top clients I would like to win? Like, how do you do it?
I think we do a lot of qualification. So we can't just work with everyone. It doesn't make sense to have like a volumes game, right? Because one of the things that you also learn when you go into consultancy is that there's a limit on your inventory, right? So basically, I have a set amount of consultants. I have a set amount of architects where when they are working on a project, they can't work on something else because there's only like X amount of hours during the day, right? So I have to be very good at finding the right customer that aligns with what we do at One Marketing. So we've actually also turned down a lot of projects. We still do. Like sometimes, we're not going to say, no, we're not going to work with you. But we also qualify in, as in, are we the right fit for your business? Because that's really important when you're a consultant. Not so much when you're a technology, because it's like, we can make everything work together. But as a consultant, it needs to be like chemistry. We need to, have the same goals. You need to trust us. We need to trust you. We need to have like, so I think that also goes into the whole sales process of, who out there do we feel would be a good fit for us? Like we work a lot with insurance, we work a lot with banking, pension, regulated industries, we work a lot with media companies. So we know that space really well. We work with some retail, we work with a lot of the global manufacturers. So what we talked about before, you have like your center of excellence in Copenhagen or in Stockholm, because we're also Swedish. And then you have to align with teams that sits in the US, in the UK, in Turkey, in Italy and stuff. How do you do that? How do you do those global rollouts? So we have frameworks of things that we know actually work that we can apply to other customers. So we tend to sort of find something that is down that line where you have complexity, you have a certain size, you have like regulation you need to be aware of, you have to have compliance in place. And that's where we feel we can add value. We don't want to work with someone where we don't feel we can add a lot of value.
Makes total sense. So we are now finalizing a project. So we're seeing that our bandwidth is coming up. We want to get new clients. So let's get one step further down in this funnel. You now then have identified, let's say, 25 dream clients, perfect ICP. So like, what do you do now? Like what's...
Probably, he was probably American. Like some sales coach once told me, like, your network is your net worth. And my colleagues are getting sick of hearing it. But I'm lucky enough that I've sort of built up a pretty good network during the years. So I think that, both in mostly in my my AE role, I think I've earned the trust of a lot of people that sort of understands that when I say something, I deliver on it. You can trust what I say. I don't do one thing and say one thing and do another and stuff. So it is very much about relationships, right? It's very much about like reaching out to the right people. Either we've worked with you before, we work with someone who does something alongside you. And we do a lot of like, it's something that I've really hammered into my organization about POVs. So basically what we say is like, you're a bank. You probably have this issue where, there's compliance rules. You have a lot of customer data. You have old systems. They don't talk to each other. Your customers are, trying new types of banks. You're getting competition from. Is this something you recognize, right? So having that point of view, again, going back to stuff that salespeople don't want to do, is something I do a lot. I actually have a point of view because I don't need to call like 200 companies. I need to call 10, 15. But when I do, I have like, I've spent time on your website. I've spent time with your email program. I've spent time with this. I can see issues with, I can see an opportunity of, if you just so this whole point of view is really something that I use a lot. And it seems to resonate that that you've done your homework and they sort of get this, okay, you've done this before, let's just have a conversation, maybe you can help us with.
I think that's one of the things, like it's that social proof, right? Like and also that you've taken the time to really understand what they're trying to do, like, or at least as far as you can get to that that
Yeah, I
conversation.
mean, you have to do like assumptions, right? So I'm assuming that you are worried about compliance, right?
Yeah.
If they say, no, we're not, it's like, holy, okay, we probably should.
Maybe I'm talking to the wrong person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You probably should be a little bit worried about it, right? So I think that's something that we try to do a lot. And then we do a lot of, I don't want thought leadership, right? But we do like morning briefs, like events where we go in and we pick a topic. We did one like a couple of weeks ago where we talked about lead management.
Yeah.
So basically we were talking about like if you have a customer coming in, it comes in maybe through the website, fills out a form, what then? Do you just shoot it over to someone from sales who called the person? Or do you want to make sure that it's not someone who's already a customer, or their wife is already a customer, or it's someone who bought a product 6 months ago, or it's someone we can't work with because they are out of whatever? Do you want to add some data? Do you want to add some context? Who from sales is it that you want to contact them? Is it like based on language? Is it based on area? So the whole lead management, like how do you actually make sure that people, like leads come into the business, they get sort of moved over to the right people, we get the right data on board, we know what's happening, and then back again, right?
Yeah. No, it's they come back to a lot of the things of data and a lot of like how to nurture this. Do you do any events?
We do. But we don't. I mean, we tried a couple of those. We sponsored Salesforce, whatever. And that's great, right? But it's more of us. It's not like us expecting to get someone coming over and say, hey, do you guys want to work with us? It's more like us coming out, showcase what we've done with others, just showing our face, being there, like being out there. They know we're around. They know what we can do and stuff. And then it will turn into something.
Yeah, mental availability.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think especially for what we do, it's not something you wake up in the morning and say, like, I should probably call One Marketing and do something. It's something where you say, we're going to invest in a new CRM system. We're going to invest in a marketing automation platform. We probably need someone who has some experience with it. We've done it for 20 years. That's all we do, by the way. We don't do any creative stuff. We don't do any like new logos or old school marketing stuff, right? We just do this.
Yeah.
So we're like the safe hand. We've done it before. We know what to ask for. We know how to vet the different vendors. We know when they say it's like plug and play or point and click and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, but.
Yes, but. Exactly, yes. Or if people say beta, it's like, yeah, then we should probably just have a step back and just say, like, can we solve this with something else?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for sitting and taking the time today. It's a lot of fun. We're almost for 1 hour and 45 minutes. Yeah. So it's
as usual. Yeah. I thought we just started.
Yeah, no, it's it goes quickly. Anything that you want to wrap? Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to touch upon, or any?
I think one of the things I missed when you asked me what I would like to, if I could talk to my younger self.
Yeah.
Be confident enough to say no. I think that's actually something that I think I've said yes too many times in my career. If you work within Oracle, Salesforce, Treasure Data, Adobe, and whatever, you can say yes to, like, you can fill up your calendar with internal meetings and QBRs and everything else, right? And you can have meetings with different people that you're not going to do anything with, but you just want to make sure that they don't get upset and stuff, right? So I would have liked to have the confidence I have today of just, prioritizing, understand what's important. Is it furthering what I'm trying to achieve? Or if it isn't. And if it isn't, don't spend time on it.
So like that's the question you would ask yourself. Like if you're so that's the question you're asking yourself now. Like, will this further my long-term vision and goal? And if it doesn't, qualify out quicker.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of AEs spend too much time on stuff they shouldn't.
Especially in big companies. It's very easy to be sucked into things.
But it's also, as you mentioned, like if you're behind on quota, like you're panicking a little bit, your manager keeps asking, like, why don't you have any meetings, right? Then you'll just, you'll grab anything, right? It's like being at a club at like 5 o'clock in the morning, right? You just go out and pick whatever you can get a hold of.
Don't know anything about that.
No, of course, obviously. Me neither. But let's imagine we did, right? So I think that's like having the confidence of saying yes or saying no. I think that's really key.
I said something that you have heard a million times, and to the point that my wife, when she imitates how to be an RVP in Salesforce, she goes like, as an AE, you only have 3 jobs. You preferably do all 3, but at least you need to do 1 at any given time. Yeah. You need to create pipe, progress pipe, and close pipe. Yeah, exactly. And if you don't do any of those 3 things, there's a PIP coming.
That's one thing I've luckily never experienced, but I get it, right? But that's back to priority, right? Are you spending your time on what you should be spending your time on? I think a lot of salespeople aren't spending the time on what they should be spending time on.
Yeah. And ask for help. Like that's another, like there's.
Be humble.
Yeah, there's.
Be humble like me.
Yeah, be humble like you aspire to be humble.
Yeah, that's right. Fair point.
Cool. That's the pod.